Good evening, friends. I am fine, and I think it was just a seasonal flu, but I took all precautions. I just want to ask all of you that is the stream coming proper, because I can see in my screen that the internet is side like that day it was happening. Breaking in between. Yes. Just give me 5 minutes to fix this. I'll just change internet connection. Okay, just give me. Okay, so I'm back. I think now the connection would be fine. Okay, because now the connection is not fluctuating on my side. Okay, so we'll continue without already it is 8 p.m. So we are quite back. We have to cover up fast in few days. So we'll continue. So we were talking about the topic of areal differentiation, and if I remember correctly, I essentially explained you what is the conception of areal differentiation. Yes or no? Tell me first. I explained you the conception of areal differentiation. So up till that, I don't think there should not be much of problem. We'll further continue and see how the things have evolved, but I think till that time there should not be much of problem. Yes or no? Okay. So concept we have already talked about, and we will be now talking about the historical development of regional approach or areal differentiation approach. Okay, so that is what we are going to talk about. Historical development of regional approach. Webos, see, the video is there already, so I'm not going to repeat. It will take lots of time. It will take at least half an hour for me to repeat that. Sometimes, always in life, there are two faces of coin. There is always positive and negative, which are together. You can understand without negative, there would be no meaning to positive. So if there is no bad, then there is no meaningful good in life. So same thing here also. There was break of the class for some time, but tell me, with this bad which was there, the break of the class for some time, how many of you took advantage of it and created the good out of it? Can anybody here say that I created good out of it? And clearly the good out of it was a break was conducive for the revision of what we have already done. And those of you who ultimately would have revised, it is going to do very good for you. Okay, so some of you are clearly focused enough, others who didn't, you have to look that what you have to do. Okay, so from now on there should be, that means less of a problem if we have revised properly. So historical development of the regional approach. Now if I talk about the historical development of the regional approach, we find that the regional approach has passed through number of phases in its development. Okay, and इसमें भी लिखवाया होगा मैंने. Okay, here I have talked about but here I'll give you some kind of revised headings which I have made it more meaningful. So I will talk about first phase 1, and phase 1 was, we can say, regional approach as choreography. Second phase has been phase 2, and phase 2 we can say regional approach as chorology and areal differentiation. As chorology and areal differentiation. Okay, so this was the period. Then third phase, we can say phase 3. In fact, we can also, if I want to further extend this point, I can say that regional approach at its zenith, at its peak. Then comes the phase 3 and decline of regional approach, and we can say that here regional approach at its nadir. The nadir is what? Lowest point, at its nadir. And then phase 4, and we can say in phase 4 what has happened? Rise of new regional geography. Approach. Rise of the new regional geography approach. So can you at this point remember these 4 phases? Phase 1, we are saying that it was more like regional approach was developing during this period, and basically it was present as chorography. But then what we find, that regional approach developed as chorology and areal differentiation, chorology in Germany and areal differentiation in America. After World War, we will see that ultimately what happens, that there is decline of the regional approach. We know that this was the period when quantitative revolution came and geography tended to become more like a science, like a systematic science. Again, what we find after quantitative revolution, there has been rise of regional geography. We are calling this type of regional geography as new regional geography. Okay, so can you understand the chronology so that I can continue with phase 1? So let us talk about the first, that is phase 1. Regional approach as chorography. As chorography. So if we talk about the regional approach as chorography, can I say regional approach is most ancient approach of geographical studies, which has been there since the times of Greco-Roman. ठीक है. Very clearly during this period, what we find? Very clearly during this period we find that if we talk about from this period is from Greco-Roman to the pre-modern. Greco-Roman to pre-modern period. Now, during this period, what we find that regional approach was highly descriptive. One point. And that is why we are calling this as what? Chorography, which is reflected in the term chorography. That is, chorography literally means description of the region. That is one thing. Plus, there is another important thing during this period. What was the thing? There was dominance of the objective viewpoint of regions. Objective viewpoints of regions. And what was this objective viewpoints of region? Whereby regions are considered as real entities which actually exist on geographical space. Which actually exist on the geographical space. Okay? So this is these two are the defining points. Chorography it was, and it was dominated by the objective view of the regions. Okay? So these two were the defining points of the first phase. And if we talk about, like for example, Greek geographers, if we talk about, so do you remember that we have talked about Homer in his book Odyssey. Homer has given description of various civilizations through his prose, the prose that he has written. Okay? Similarly, if you talk about, it was Herodotus. Again, we find that here in writing he has written the history of various areas and civilizations, which is again what? Which is again, so the description of the region. But more importantly, we find it was Roman period when we find that which Roman we are talking about here? Tell me fast. Which Roman geographer we are talking about? Okay, very good, Balbir. It was none other than Strabo. So Strabo, we have seen that his writings are distinctively described as chorography. His writings included, his writings included description of cultures found across the known world. So we find that during this period, again, what was the case? There was Strabo who was writing, who was describing the areas. Then after the Roman period, we find there was Arabic period, and Arabic period it was Al-Biruni, and Al-Biruni we have already talked about. He was the Strabo of Arabic period. His writing was essentially chorographical. And if you talk about this chorographical, he presented comparative cultural studies from the places he visited. So again, we find that during the Arabic period there was the case of Al-Biruni. Then we find that the next in line was the classical period, and in the classical period we know very well that even Varenius recognized regional geography as which geography? What he named it as? Tell me. As special geography. And he was very clear that this part of geography included study of humans and thus the scientific and systematic way of study was not suitable for it. Okay, so it was very clear that it is mostly what? It is description of unique. So it included what? It included the description of unique phenomena. So that was the case of Varenius. Similarly, if you talk about in the classical period, there was another person who was that? It was Kant. And Kant, in his philosophy of exceptionalism, treated geography as description of phenomena in geographical space, description of the phenomena in geographical space. ठीक है, which is essentially what? Which is essentially the meaning of the term chorography. So he treated geography essentially as what? Chorography. So we find that even in the classical period, the theme of chorography was the dominant theme. Then we find that later on in the pre-modern period, it was whom? It was Karl Ritter, who essentially developed the regional theme. And in this regional theme, very clearly, what he does, he talks about the concept of spatial unity, whereby two type of unity he talks about, which were horizontal, पहले vertical लिखो फिर horizontal, vertical, horizontal, vertical and horizontal type of unity. Now this conception of spatial unity, it was essentially what? It was essentially an attempt to develop what? Develop regional geography as chorology. ठीक है. But can we say here one very clear thing, despite his idea of developing interrelations between the phenomena, his actual writings remained chorographical. His actual writings remained chorographical, and this is evident from the book he has written, that is Ardh Kunde. So in Ardh Kunde, essentially what is found? There is description of geographical phenomena at continental and subcontinental scales. Continental and subcontinental scales. ठीक है. So this is basically what? This is phase 1 of the regional approach. Can we say that? Okay. So this is phase 1, and there was one question. Just give me 1 minute. I'll talk about this question. So this question was actually asked in UPSC, and I'll write this question. critically examine the changing perspectives on the concept of areal differentiation. ये कब आया था? 2010. And how much marks it was? I think it was 30 marks, something like that. What was the marks allotted? 30 marks, yes. So it was 30 marks question. ठीक है, which would mean that in the present regime it would be 20 marker. ठीक है, so critically examine the changing perspectives on the concept of areal differentiation. Now tell me, after reading this question, what is the first task I have to do? While I am reading this question, what is my first task? Can I say that I will see that here it is saying concept of areal differentiation, and can I say first thing I will write about, or I will think about, I will identify whether the question is asking me the narrow view of areal differentiation or the broad view of areal differentiation. Yes or no? हमने पहले भी इसी बात के बारे में बात किया था लास्ट क्लास में, that first thing when in the question the term areal differentiation is asked, the first thing I will do is I will try to identify whether I have to think about the narrow view or the broad view. So here, which type of view do you think is palpable or is meant here? Very clearly it is the broad meaning of areal differentiation. Okay, so we will be using that all the phases. Areal differentiation here is equal to regional approach, and another thing that I will look into is critically examine. Yes or no? So there is critically examine, and when I have to do critically examine, what I will be writing? Can I say for each of the phases the weakness has to be written, the shortcomings have to be very, very clearly written. So when we have finished writing about our phase 1, do we also need to talk about the shortcomings of phase 1? Yes or no? The shortcomings of the phase 1. So what essentially you can see with respect to the shortcomings of phase 1? Can I say when geography was being treated as choreography, we find that this was incompatible with the modern sciences, essentially incompatible with the modern sciences. And what was the important aspect of the modern sciences? All modern sciences were analytical in nature, And when you are developing geography as chorography, can I say geography essentially becomes an encyclopedic discipline. And with too much focus on the unique, what it would do, it would develop or hinder the development of science of geography. Also, tell me one thing, can I say that such encyclopedic studies had limited relevance with respect to applied nature of studies. That means it was not very useful for problem solving. As a result, status of geography could suffer among the other disciplines in future, because their disciplines were just emerging, so there was less talk at this point of time of the status. But it was very clear that if geography remained like this and in future other sciences made progress along analytical lines, along applied lines, what will happen with geography? Geography would lag behind, and thus its status would also lag behind, and it would not be very conducive for the development of geography. ठीक है? Are we clear about these points? ठीक है? As a result, there was what? There were attempts to develop geography as chorology since modern period. ठीक है? Are we clear about these points about phase 1? जल्दी से मुझे बताओ. So if you are clear, then we have paved the way for discussion on phase 2. And as we said, phase 2 is what? Regional approach as chorology and areal differentiation. And this was the time when we will see that the regional approach was at its zenith, at its peak. Okay, so that is phase 2. So when we are talking about phase 2, as we very clearly understand that during this period, the demand of modern sciences was taken into account. So first I'll talk about the general thing, then we'll talk about specifically what was the task which was done by geographers, which was undertaken by geographers. Okay. So with respect to specific geographers, we'll talk about later. So first, if I talk about what was the general aspect of phase 2. So during the phase 2, geographers tried to develop science of regions, that is chorology. That is chorology. If we talk about this approach, can I say it was continuation of the spatial unity concept propounded by Ritter in Germany. The spatial unity concept propounded by Ritter in Germany. So what happens in chorology? Focus is on developing the developing, or you can also write, or establishing the interrelationships between various geographical components, depending upon these interrelations, similarities and differences between different regions, or we can say places, better to go places. Places are established. Similarities and differences between different places are established. So what happens? Established, and boundaries of the regions are identified. Boundaries of the regions are identified. That means the boundaries are not given. Boundaries are basically what? They emerge. That means they are identified. Very clearly, if we talk about Thus, in chorological approach, subjective view of regions dominate. Subjective view of regions dominate. And what was the subjective view of the regions? According to this viewpoint, regions are mental entities. They are mental entities. That means they do not exist in reality. So, according to this view, regionalization is a tool of geography to classify a given geographical space based on some chosen criteria. I have already explained you the difference between spatial and this objective and subjective view. So it is based upon chosen criteria. As the criteria changes, so does the regions and their boundaries. ठीक है? So does the regions and their boundaries. So this is what we essentially mean by the subjective view. So during this period, the regional approach which developed, such type of regional approach was essentially based upon the fundamental principles of the subjective view of regions. Okay, the chorology, it was essentially about the subjective view of regions. So if we talk about these subjective views, can you understand now what was the basic idea of chorology? Tell me fast. So if we talk about chorology, was essentially, this was tried to be developed during which period? From early to intermediate modern period. Early to intermediate modern period. And one of the first persons to talk about, who was that person? कोई बता सकता है? It was none other than Richthofen in Germany. Richthofen in Germany. So if you talk about, according to Richthofen, there are two steps of geographical enquiry. There are two steps of geographical enquiry. One is enquiry or research. So first step, So first step was observation, and then second step was explication. Then the second step was explication. ठीक है. Explication. So he says that, in fact, this first step, if you talk about, it was synonym with choreography, and the second step was synonym with chorology. ठीक है. Now what he says, observations, first की बात करें, first step, observations of the peculiar phenomena, observations of observations of or observations made in particular areas where the features are unique. Features are unique has been the regional or special geography. Has been the regional or special geography. But he goes on and says that, but the knowledge achieved through observation must go beyond. It must go beyond the description of unique features. Description of the unique features. The next step is to seek regularities in the observed phenomena, regularities in the observed phenomena, and formulate hypothesis and generalizations on the basis of it to explain the observed characteristics. To explain the observed characteristics. That means regional geography, what he was trying to say, that till now the regional geography has been content with describing the phenomena, but describing the phenomena was not very useful till this phenomena is also used, or this observation is used to find the regularities, and on the basis of which hypothesis can be made, interconnections can be made, and the phenomena can actually be explained, analyzed. Okay. So for him, what was the case? Regional geography, the classical regional geography should not be satisfied with descriptions. Ultimately, its aim should be what? its aim should be to reach higher levels, at least the level of hypothesis. ठीक है. So can you see what was he meaning when he was trying to ultimately explain chorography and chorology? Tell me, after reading these writings, this is actually translated version of his real German writing. So tell me, after reading this, do you really feel that he was against systematic geography? As many geographers later will see that have tried to portray it as dichotomy, but was he dichotomous? Very clearly not. He was not dichotomous, he was more dualistic. He preferred regional geography to reach generalizations, to develop the science of geography. Okay? So that is basically the idea of Richthofen. This idea in Germany was very clearly progressed by none other than Hettner. So in the early modern period, it essentially developed like Hettner, by Hettner. So if you talk about Hettner, he was, I have already talked about this, he was critical of Richthofen for his inability to develop chorology or the science of the regions. So he was critical, and Hettner very clearly developed the this chorology. He developed chorology in Germany between 1895 to 1937. This was the period when his academic career was there. So, what were the basic ideas of Hettner with respect to chorology? Let us see. So, for Hettner, geography for him was a science, unified on the basis of method. Rather than the subject matter. Okay? So he believed that geography case is parallel to that of history. Its case is parallel to that of history, and history was essentially concerned with what? It was concerned with, you can say what he was saying, central issue of history is the development of man on the earth, in terms of time, whereas central issue of geography central issue of geography is the development of man in terms of spatial variations. In terms of spatial variations. ठीक है. So for him geography was what? It was study of space. ठीक है. Thus for him geography was all about, it was chorology, that is science of regions, that is science of regions or places. And when he is visualizing geography as chorology, he very clearly rejects the traditional dichotomy. He is rejecting the traditional dichotomy between place and space. Place and space. And देखो, I will be later talking about these two concepts, place and space. So place was essentially what it was, basic conception was, it was a kind of area or region. So in place you are studying unique phenomena, while space is more with concerned with generalizations. So it was more systematic. Unique phenomena. So he rejected this traditional dichotomy. For him, what was very clear that both are important and complementary to each other. This both systematic geography and regional geography, they both are important, significant, as well as complementary to each other. How they are important and complementary to each other? According to Hettner, very clearly, the concepts that you make in the systematic geography, these concepts are in turn applied in regional geography, and they are tested whether they work actually or not, and thus they are improved upon. That means if there are weaknesses in the concept, they would be further improved. Changes would be made in the general concepts which were there. And in turn, what they would help? In turn, they would help to analyze the regional phenomena. Proper understanding of the regional phenomena. Okay? So what he says that the aim of chorology, is to understanding the character of regions through comprehending the interrelations among the different इसी को याद करके देखो ना एक बार, एयरटेल को तो कंप्लेंट करनी पड़ेगी।
वाह,
वही हो रहा है ब्लैक।
इसको चल रहे तो पहले रेड लाइट जल रही है, सारी लाइट जल रही है।
Please wait यार। Okay, welcome back. Okay, am I visible now? I should be visible. LS group. Okay. So we are living in digital India. So this is very good example of digital India. You can understand. So right now the thing is that even the internet connection in Pakistan and Bangladesh is faster than India. ठीक है, it is faster than India, but still you can understand we have to be satisfied because there is already Ram has taken new avatar now in Dadi, and soon there would be Ram Raj established. So we have to be very very happy for that. ठीक है. Okay, so we are saying aim of chorology, and aim of chorology is basically what, for him, understanding the character of the regions through comprehending the interrelations among different realms of reality. So he insisted that geography is both at the same time ideographic as well as nomothetic, Now again read Hettner's idea and tell me, was Hettner anywhere in what he is writing here about regional geography, do you think that Hettner anywhere talks about that geography is only regional geography? Is his approach dichotomous? Tell me. Is his approach dichotomous? No, very clearly no. His approach is very clearly what it is, dualistic. He prefers regional approach, but he says that, but he very clearly says that it is both. It is at the same time ideographic as well as nomothetic. Okay. So that is about Hettner's approach. Now this approach was developed in Germany. This approach in the interwar period period, this approach was adopted in America by whom? It was Richard Hartshorne. It was Richard Hartshorne. ठीक है, it was Richard Hartshorne, and Richard Hartshorne adopted the chorological approach of Hettner and developed it as areal differentiation and developed it as areal differentiation. ठीक है. Now if we talk about this theme of areal differentiation, as we said, areal differentiation was also concerned with what? It was concerned with the interrelations between unique geographical phenomena found in space. What was the basic idea? To develop or to identify the boundaries of the regions and to explain the characteristics of the identified regions. ठीक है. Now if you talk about Hartshorne, like Hettner and before him Richthofen, he clearly demarcated the regional geography. What he did? He clearly differentiated regional geography from the regional approach. Regional geography from the regional approach, ये बहुत important point है. So what he did, he clearly differentiated the regional geography from regional approach. So what was basically regional geography? Regional geography was the traditional regional writings, most of which represented mere description of the phenomena, represented mere description of the phenomena. ठीक है. So that is basically what that was regional geography. And when it comes to regional approach, for Hartshorne, what was regional approach? Regional approach was the desired regional writings, where one moves from mere description to establishing interrelations between the phenomena and interrelations between the phenomena and explaining the characteristics of the region. ठीक है. So if you talk about areal differentiation, was basically what? Areal differentiation was essentially his regional approach, was essentially the regional approach, which in turn was essentially what? Chorology for Hartshorne. And Hartshorne also, like Hettner, Hartshorne was firm believer in the fact that both systematic and regional geography or regional approaches were part of geography and were complementary to each other. They were also complementary to each other. So what was happening? Concepts developed in systematic geography are tested and improved by application in regional studies. In turn, they help in understanding of the regional phenomena. ठीक है, ये सेकेंड अप्रोच समझ में आ गया? टेल मी. So, this was the second phase, geography regional approach in the second phase. It developed as chorology and areal differentiation. Areal differentiation was nothing but adoption of the German chorology in English speaking America by Hartshorne. So, it didn't add much significant or much of significance to the approach, just he adopted it in America, okay, and made it very popular in the English speaking world. Okay. So, that was the basic idea. Now, if we talk about shortcoming of this approach, that is shortcomings of chorology. So, very important fact of chorology was it was a very rigid approach. I have already explained this phenomena, yaad hai? It was a very rigid approach, and rigid approach in the sense that here there was fixed set of geographical criterias and a fixed sequence in which the interrelations were to be established so that regional boundaries could be identified. It was very cumbersome approach. Do you remember we talked about how, like for example, the criterias like physiography, and within physiography there was numerous criterias which were there like topography, climate can be further subdivided into numerous criterias. There was hydrology or drainage, others like flora, fauna, soil. So many criteria were taken under physiography. Similarly, there was economic criteria. Within economic criteria, number of them were there, like the primary sector, secondary sector industries, tertiary sector industries which were there. Similarly, others like population was part of this, settlement. Similarly, if you talk about cultural elements of an area, like for example, language, religion, architecture, and so on. So, it was fixed set of criteria were to be chosen, and interrelationship between them one by one. बताया था मैंने. First you take physiography, then you superimpose a map of climate, और सॉरी you take topography का मैप लिया, फिर उसके ऊपर क्लाइमेट का मैप सुपर इम्पोज करके आई फाइंड दैट देयर आर सम सिमिलैरिटीज. देन अगेन हाइड्रोलॉजिकल मैप सुपर इम्पोज्ड, फ्लोरल, फॉनल, so many. Each of these map kept on getting superimposed, and ultimately on the basis of that you will find that where these are interrelated and which areas show similarity in all these cases, and then you ultimately arrive at a given boundary of the regions. You ultimately identify the region. So it was a very cumbersome approach. ठीक है? Are we clear about this? So what was the result? So result or outcome of this approach was that most of actual regional geography writings remained chorographical. And if we talk about these, why it was happening, why it remained chorographical, it was found that most of the geographers finished their academic careers in collection of geographical information related with selected criteria under chorology. ठीक है? So they finished their academic careers in the collection of geographical information. By the time interrelations were to be established, they already retired. As a result, chorology could not develop. Practically speaking, chorology could not develop. ठीक है? This much point you have understood? Tell me. Okay, very good. From the ALS group, see here Murari is saying why you are unnecessarily critical of the present government. This is my class, I can give any sort of examples. What I feel is correct, I am giving examples. I am talking about facts. 1. 2. जब तुम लोगों को ऐसा फालतू क्वेश्चंस पूछने हैं तो यू पीपल हैव गॉट टाइम टू टाइप इतना लंबा सेंटेंस, सर वाई यू आर अननेसेसरली क्रिटिकल ऑफ प्रेजेंट गवर्नमेंट, ठीक है, देन यू हैव गॉट द टाइम टू टाइप. बट व्हेन आई एम जस्ट आस्किंग yes और no, तो देन यू पीपल हैव सो मेनी एक्सक्यूजेज, ऐसा होता है वैसा होता है. ओके, so as a result, practically speaking, chorology could not develop. Can I say that we have seen that this rigidity was already perceived by some geographers early on, and due to which what they did, due to which they tried to adopt a different regional approach which was more practical, ठीक है. एंड टेल मी विच वर दीज जोग्राफर्स. हियर वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट, पूरी हिस्ट्री समझा चुका हूं तुम लोगों को. विच वर दीज जोग्राफर्स विच वर प्रेजेंट ड्यूरिंग द अर्ली मॉडर्न एंड इंटरमीडिएट मॉडर्न पीरियड. Can I say it was one Vidal, another was Schluter, and another was Sawyer. Hartshorne कहाँ था यार? Hartshorne was proponent of areal differentiation. That is what we have already written. So can I say that these three adopted a different type of regional approach? And what was this different version of regional approach? Can I say here their regional approach tried to find interrelations between the phenomena, but can we say, but they preferred, or I can say leaned more towards objective view of regions where physiographic criteria already provide the boundaries of a given region. Geographer's task is to identify these given boundaries and explain the relations between human and environment in the identified region. Tell me, can I say, is this not the summary of the three people study that we are talking about, Vidal, Schluter and Carl Sawyer? Yes or no? They also focused upon interrelationship, but their way was different. Their way was more practical. They focused upon that there is already given boundaries of regions. There are already physical regions which are present. So the focus should be on what? Identification of those regions and establishing the human environment relationship in the given region or the identified region. Okay, so that is what they were trying to establish. So if we talk about, if we start with each of them, तीनों की बात करते हैं एक एक करके. First was Vidal's or Vidalian approach or regional approach. You can add here Vidalian regional approach. So Vidal de Lablache, we have already seen, he developed this in France, in the French geography or in the French school of geography, and the period in which he was working, it was 1870 to 1919. This was the period when he actually worked, and he was basically, you can understand Vidalian approach, that at the time he was working, France was mainly an agrarian economy. Agrarian का मतलब है even the industries were agrarian characteristics industries. ठीक है, and much of France population was rural. Much of French population was rural population. ठीक है, so rural people, if you talk about, are mostly relatively stable and rooted to land. Stable and rooted to land. So in this context, arose the Vidalian approach of pace and genre divide. ठीक है, according to him, what was the objective of geography was to describe and explain, the realities of landscape, to show their peculiarities, and their spatial differences. Spatial differences. Okay. So this was his basic idea, that it was basically, what was the meaning here? He is saying two words he is using: describe and also to explain the realities of the landscape. So here description means what? Analyzing the basic elements of an area, and explanation means what? To ultimately interlink them, to ultimately synthesize the regional realities. Okay. So that was the basic conception of Vidal, the geography of Vidal. He was very clear that here pays, what the pays signifies? Pays were the drainage basins of France. While if you talk about, we have already seen, Genre de Vai was the culture associated with these drainage basins. So what he found, he found that each of these drainage basins were basically what? They were having unique culture associated with them. So what he found? He found that the relationship between human, the relationship between human and his immediate surroundings, that is environment or the milieu. Environment or the milieu over a long period of association have produced a unique or generic regions. In fact यहाँ पे केवल यही लिखा, generic regions with their unique way of life. Way of life. And if you talk about this unique way of life was, as we said, Genre de Vai. ठीक है. So this was essentially the Vidalian approach. ठीक है, Vidalian approach. एक one more thing I just want you to write here about the Vidalian approach, and it is essentially to tell you or to inform you that how, even if you talk about Vidal, even Vidal conception was higher. It was very much like through the regional approach he wanted to reach to development of science of geography. ठीक है. So ये अलग से लिख लो as a note. It is not written in the material, so I am telling you. So in his later work, works, what he has done, he attributed regional concept to a wider role. And he very clearly recognized the study of certain region as being only first step of certain region as being only the first step towards comparing it with other regions. And such comparison would lead to what? Such comparisons lead to general lessons acquired from the study of particular regions. Study of particular regions. Okay. And he very clearly writes that geography must become a science which analyzes, classifies and compares. Okay. So what he was very clear, Dahl was very clear that geography must become a science which analyzes, classifies and compares. Okay. So very clearly generalization was what? It was a very essential parts of Vidal's concept of geography. So can you here again can we come to the conclusion that Vidal's approach was also not dichotomous. His approach was what? Was Vidal against systematic geography or scientific geography? Tell me. It was very clearly dualistic. He was also not dichotomous. Okay. So that is about Vidal's geography, and two people we can simultaneously talk about. Landschaft or landscape as explained by Schluter and Sawyer respectively. इन दोनों की भी बात हमने की है. Schluter very clearly identified the inherent problems in the Hettner's chorological approach. Hettner's chorological approach. ठीक है. As a result, what was his idea? That so as a reaction to such rigid approach or such rigid regional approach, what he did, he developed his own landschaft approach. So in his landschaft approach, what he found, that he finds that it is easier to identify already given boundaries of natural regions. One of the easy identifiable natural regions, और यहाँ पर हम लिख सकते हैं natural regions और what they were Landschaft. One of the easily identifiable natural regions or the Landschaft were those based on topography. So his approach was what? Taking Landschaft as reference point, regional study should focus upon how, with application of cultures, these have been converted to culture landschaft. They have been converted to culture landschaft. So taking landschaft as you start from the landschaft and you develop a regional study where you find that how the interaction between the human and environment has taken place in a manner that now this area can be identified as a separate cultural entity, a cultural region. Okay? So this was essentially the idea of Schluter. We know very well that this approach was imported in America by Carl Sawyer in the interwar period. This approach was imported, and it was Carl Sawyer who talked about the transformation. He studied the transformation of natural landscape to a cultural landscape through application of culture over a given period of time. ठीक है, over a given period of time. So it was in the interwar period that this was adopted. ठीक है, and on the basis of that he developed his own landscape school of geography. ठीक है, landscape school of geography or of कार्ल सॉयर. ठीक है, so that was basically the idea of Sawyer. So Sawyer says few more things, just we can write. He says that all sciences may be regarded as phenomenology. Phenomenology is essentially what? An attempt to understand phenomena. An attempt to understand phenomena. ठीक है, so phenomena. For him, earth science is, or we can say was, in its first stage naive. First stage naive, in so far as it takes as given that part of reality that is its field of study. ठीक है, so in the first stage what it is? Naive. He is basically saying what? That some realities are already given and you have to first do what? Identify and describe these realities. So it is what? It is naive in the first stage. So what happens in the next stage? It becomes critical. In the next stage it becomes critical. Undertaking to determine the ordering of and connections between the phenomena. And connections between the phenomena. ठीक है, he very clearly wrote, and I am just quoting from him, to discover the connection of phenomena is the only scientific task task to which geography should devote its energy, to which geography should devote its energy. ठीक है. So very clearly in his landscape approach, what is there? A landscape is an area which is made up of several physical as well as cultural phenomena. And but this landscape, the features are not isolated. They are what? They are interconnected to each other. And geography's task is to do what? To understand these interconnections which are there. Okay. So this was the basic approach of regional geography which was adopted by Carl Sawyer. ठीक है. So they developed their geography as their regional geography as a critique, as a result of the shortcomings of the chorological approach. Can you understand? Tell me. One thing we can conclude here, that despite these attempts regional geography came under severe criticism by the end of Second World War. It was subjected to severe criticism by the end of Second World War. What were the basic reasons for the criticisms which were there? One very important criticism which was there was that if you talk about regional geography was too much descriptive, which we already talked about. So we are just summarizing. It was descriptive and encyclopedic. It was like a collection of mundane information or geographical information. ठीक है. So that was one. Second, within regional approach there were several naive approaches. Like if we give example that of Herbertson's natural regions. देखा है हमने? And where what he did? He divided the world into several natural regions. ठीक है, like the equatorial region, etc., he divided it into several regions. Now what was found, that in each of these natural regions there were several inconsistencies even with respect to the chosen criteria. even with respect to chosen criteria. Okay, so such approaches were described as what? They were described as very naive approaches. So, for example, we will be finding that if you talk about, suppose I am talking about equatorial region, okay, equatorial region, and if I give you one example, equatorial region has presence of latosols. Yes or no? They have presence of red soil, that is latosols. Now, this is a general aspect, a chosen criteria for equatorial regions, the natural regions. Now, if you talk about these type of equatorial regions, if you go in Indonesia, for example, and if you particularly go in, like for example, in Borneo, island of Indonesia, you will be finding that there are several areas where tropical rainforests have grown even on sandy soil. And very clearly this tells us that both regions, although both these areas where there is red soil and where there is sandy soil, although they look similar, but can we say that they are actually different and unique? Yes or no? Tell me. So, this was another. Similarly, third important criticism was to static approaches like that of Vidal. So, it was argued that geography, particularly of the resources, has become highly mobile. So, what should happen? Such static resources or such static approaches fail to recognize these dynamic and mobile characteristics of geography. Okay. So, at the end of Second World War, we find that regional geography was already under very severe criticism, and ultimately what we find that a blow to regional geography was dealt when in 1953. In 1953, and in 1953 what happened? There was a paper which was presented by Schaefer, and this paper was exceptionalism. Exceptionalism in geography. And this was presented by Schaefer. So, a very severe criticism emerged in 1953. Okay, and ultimately we see that This was the reason why ultimately the period of 1950s and 60s was the period when the third phase came, and when what we find, regional geography was at its nadir, ठीक है, was at its lowest point, ठीक है. So if you talk about this lowest point, हमने क्या फेज 3 क्या बनाया था, what was the name of phase 3? Decline of regional approach, ठीक है, that was the heading that we have to put. So will you be in a position now to critically examine the second phase? Decline of the regional approach, ठीक है. So here you can see I have given this here in this part. Decline of traditional regional geography. So the fate of regional geography suffered a decline in the post-World War II period, particularly in Anglo-American geography. In Anglo-America, systematic approaches drawing upon possibilistic theme soon took a leading position, causing the decline and ultimately the replacement of regional geography as esteemed research field. अब यहाँ पर एक ठीक है, एक मिनट. Such a decline and replacement was based upon several factors along with rise of systematic areas of geography. The development of quantitative methods played a significant role in such change. Moreover, the representative of this new geography, quantitative revolution, also developed explicit criticism of regional geography. This criticism was most manifested in posthumously published paper Exceptionalism in Geography by Fred K. Schaeffer in 1953. Pranav, wait for, I have seen your comment. What you are asking, it will take a lots of time because I have already explained that. So wait for the class to finish, after I will explain. He challenged the descriptive regional geographical approach and saw it as inward looking. In fact, his paper became the focal point of development of new geography, which was quantitative revolution. ठीक है. So during this period, regional geography suffered various type of criticisms, including regional approach was criticized as weary succession of physical and human facts which characterize the writing of human geographers. In 1942, James wrote, "The trouble has perhaps been that many regional geographers have tried to include too much." It was criticized for its naive approaches of macro regionalization, like Herbertson classification of world into natural regions. It was found that there were large inconsistencies within such natural regions, and thus it was seemed absurd to call them as regions under the strict principles of uniformity of areal differentiation approach. It was also criticized for its claims like French pays, which suggested that whole earth surface can be divided into such regions which can be designated as real entities. The most scathing criticism came in 1953 by Schaeffer's paper. He criticized exceptionalist viewpoint of Hartshorne and presented an alternative case for geography to adopt philosophy and methods of the positivistic school. So एक यहाँ पर ये था. सिस्टमैटिक अप्रोचेस ड्राइंग अपॉन, ये पॉसिबिलिस्टिक नहीं है, दिस इज जस्ट करेक्ट इट, दिस इज पॉजिटिविस्टिक थीम होना चाहिए यहां पर। इट इज पॉजिटिविस्टिक थीम, ठीक है। So are we clear about this period? So now we will be talking about the third phase of regional geography, and this third phase of regional geography was when regional geography or regional approach declined. It reached its bottom. ठीक है, ओके। सो अभी का आज के लिए मैं खत्म करता हूं एंड विल कंटिन्यू दिस टुमारो। वन थिंग फ्रॉम टुडेज डिस्कशन अगेन बिकम्स क्लियर, and what is that thing which becomes clear? That it is absolutely futile. It is absolutely futile for you to search for what we are studying in the class into the books that you have. Tell me, any of you have tried to read the 3 given books of perspectives or the geographical thoughts, whether it is Majid Hussain, whether it is, if you talk about Deepta Adhikari or R.D. Dikshit? Tell me, in any of these books, do you think that how we are systematically covering each of the topics and how we are dividing, each of them into phases and trying to logically understand that how the development has taken place is more than enough. It is actually more than enough. So if you don't focus upon, here so many people are saying that I have read the book and they didn't understand anything, because the books are simply example of what these scholars talked about, that majority of geographers have been mostly descriptive rather than explanatory. ठीक है, so what I'm just trying to say that after the classes would be over, you will be going and some of you would qualify and ultimately be writing mains, and I will also find that some of you actually qualified and reached on to achieve your goals, while others would not. So, you know, what is the basic difference that would be there between those who could and those who could not? The basic difference would be very clearly that some restricted themselves and became more practical, even if they didn't understand some of the concepts at this point of time, which is very, very common and logical. What they simply did, they simply focused upon memorization rather than taking the ideal route. You will find that once you begin to memorize and once things are there in your memory, the interconnections, the explanations would be coming by itself. You'll ultimately get those interconnections. Already हमने अपने notes में इतना better तरीके से we have established those interconnections. ठीक है? So that means it is not going to be a problem. One thing from these discussions, you can also understand that you have got the best content in geography. If you are unable to utilize this content, okay, many people might buy this content and ultimately they would be able to read this content, but do you really think that if they are reading, will they get the same insight which we are getting in the class? So much I tell you in between the lines, I explain you in between the lines. They don't have those classes to establish those in between the lines understandings. Okay? And despite this, I will very clear, I will show you in every result there were students who just bought my notes, they studied properly, went, wrote the exam and qualified. So why they qualified? It was very simple, because they were able to reproduce many of the things. They were able to memorize many of these things which we are studying in the class. And thus, they ultimately did well in the examination. So why it happens that कि मेरे अपने class के students they are unable to do this? You know, one of my class notes, handwritten class notes, they are there in the market. And those handwritten class notes belong to a particular student of my class. And the thing was, every year he used to meet me. हर बार वो प्रीलिम्स के काफ़ी दिन तो प्रीलिम्स नहीं हुआ, एक बार प्रीलिम्स हुआ तो फिर मेंस ही वेंट ऑन टू राइट. एंड अल्टीमेटली every time he used to meet me and talk about कि क्या करना है, how to prepare this problem, that problem, which things to read. ठीक है, every time these same questions. What should be the strategy of preparation? And you know, when students come to me and ask me these type of questions, I repeat in my mind, मैं म्यूट करके बोलता हूं कि इस बंदे का तो मुश्किल एग्जाम, he would not qualify. Because I have already told you before also, there are two type of people. One, who are daydreamers. So those who are too much concerned about strategy, ye, wo, aisa, vaisa, they are basically belonging to this category, who are daydreamers. Those who are implementers, that is the second category, they actually do their given task and improve upon it. They don't need too much of support. They are quite self-dependent. I had written अभी in between, there was lots of I think मैंने तुम लोगों के ग्रुप में भी शेयर किया था. Do you have seen that, which I wrote about the previous students' copies, previous year students' copies? Yes or no? So did you read that? It was in the same group. It is literally truth that in the same group of 500 plus, which is now ongoing, there were two toppers, rank 16 and rank 43. उसी में थे. And nobody knew that they were part of that group till results came, and ultimately we also found out that they have again enrolled for the course, second time, third time. Then we ultimately found out that they were there in the group itself. And in the group, you'll find so many people have so many problems कि ऐसा नहीं हो रहा है, ये नहीं है, वो नहीं है. But their voice was never heard. They never argued for anything. Why? Because it is very simple. They know that nothing is perfect in this world. And when we blame other people, it is just, we are blaming, actually we are neglecting our own weaknesses. We are just trying to find the scapegoats. So they learned this by experience. That is why they were repeating for the second and third times. Because they, even in when they were doing previously classes, they identified that there were several weak holes which remained. And they ultimately got their goal. So you have to be like this, you have to be more self-critical rather than a critique of other people, other systems. You have to find critique within yourself. So again I am repeating, you have got the best notes. If you still couldn't qualify for the exam, you should take the blame. Nobody else is responsible. Neither these internet problems, neither our slow classes, neither anyone. It is you who are the problem. You have to accept this. So many people talk to me about class over नहीं हुआ and class slow pace पे चल रहा है. I just ask you one question. Tell me that even if I suppose मैं अपना पूरा का पूरा 500 का course very satisfactorily, students are so much satisfied that they tell me that we were not even taught this much in depth in our optional classes. And I complete that whole in almost 40 sessions I am taking, and 40 sessions of roughly 3 hours I am taking. So that means in 120 hours मैं syllabus को complete कर सकता हूँ. This much ability I have. But why I am taking here so much of trouble? फालतू में मेरा ही टाइम जा रहा है. The thing which like other teachers complete in 3.5 months, 4 months maximum, I can also do. क्या फर्क पड़ता है? Even better than them, those teachers I am talking about. I already do that in 500 plus. Why? Because you'll always remember me, and at least at the end of the process, you will be blaming yourself. You should be blaming yourself. Will be to I don't know, but at least not me. कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है. Syllabus even if we like 4 months में खत्म कर दें and your concepts are not clear, उसका क्या फायदा? What is the meaning of that study? Our studies have become too much quantitative rather than qualitative, and this market like thing which is there today, they have made education like really a shop, a business. We are all victims of that. It should not be like this. Whether you become a civil servant or not, remember the things you will learn here will remain with you throughout your life. And this learning is essentially what? It is the biggest power a human being can have. It is going to make your character. It is going to ultimately make you what you will be in future. So I hope you will not pay attention to any here and there nonsense talks and just focus upon memorizing the class notes. All these notes should be memorized by heart. ठीक है? Okay. So we'll continue with the third phase in the next class. Ritika, you message me personally on my number. I'll add in you in the group. And there was someone who was asking one question. Let me find. Yes यार, आई हैव टू शेयर ऑल दोज आंसर्स एक ही साथ, एक ही मैं कंपाइल करके कर दूंगा, बिकॉज देर आर सम अदर क्वेश्चंस ऑल्सो आई हैव टू शेयर. So I'll be sharing them with you. They are related with perspectives. So just wait, एक दो दिन और wait कर लो, because there was 3 days in our daily answer writing of 500 plus and test series, which was 3 days were perspectives questions. So I have done what? I have compiled those एक दो question उसमें left हैं, which I have to still write. So I'm just waiting कि I write them and I'll compile all of them together and give you. ठीक है. So here Pranav was asking, second step, explication of chorology, where it started and where the observation and choreography ended. Simple है यार. You are basically, suppose I am trying to identify the equatorial region. Equatorial region, suppose. So what I will do, how I'll identify the equatorial region? Can I say first I will find out what is the average temperature of the area. I will find out that what is the range of temperature, what is the level of annual average precipitation of the area. I will find out what is the variability of precipitation that is there. I'll find about the soil, I'll find about what type of vegetation, and then I will interconnect these relationships. And if I find that they get interconnected, then what will happen? We'll be finding that that area would be classified as equatorial region. So for example, let us take this. Average temperature should be 27 degrees Celsius. So I take one area, some areas, suppose. So I find that this tropical region is area which has 27 degrees Celsius temperature. ठीक है? Okay. Range of temperature 2 degrees Celsius to 5 degrees Celsius. Okay. So range of temperature, I find that there are several areas where here it is to say 5 degrees Celsius, here it is 5 to 10, here it can be even more. Suppose I am just giving examples. So suppose this is 2 to 5 degrees Celsius, that is what we find in the equatorial region. Then we are talking about annual average precipitation. It should be above 250 centimeter. So I find that I put a map of rainfall map. So I find that there are some areas which are, this area is receiving 250 centimeter rainfall. So again you see that till now we are finding only this area which satisfied all the given criteria. ठीक है. Then I take variability of precipitation. Variability of precipitation means that no month should have the monthly mean rainfall less than 6 centimeter. Now I find that here there is this area which satisfied this criteria. ठीक है. So again I'll keep on applying, interconnecting the other criteria, and I'll reach and identify the region which is equatorial region. ठीक है. So I hope it is clear now, Pranav. What is this chorology? ठीक है. This is basically the interconnections which we are establishing. Why suppose in an area there is red soil? So we know it is a result of various factors. The factors which combine together are high temperature, high precipitation, that is leading to the formation of red soil. So that becomes what? That is explanations we are giving. We are not just describing. Yes, it is Hettner's approach. It is not just describing the phenomena. ठीक है. So that is basically what we essentially mean by chorology. So I'll continue this tomorrow. Good night, all of you.